The gun was already shaking before I ever touched it. Man had it half out the window, finger stiff, eyes wild. Little girl trapped in the back seat, whole block watching. One wrong move and somebody was leaving in a hearse. He thought the street would save him. He forgot whose street it was. August heat had Harlem boiling. Pavement soft, tempers softer. Folks hiding from the sun under hydrant spray, radios blasting soul out open windows. But inside that grocery store, the air went cold the second I stepped in. Not because of the machines humming overhead, because power changes temperature. I wasn't there for business, just coffee. My wife liked a certain blend, and I'd learned a long time ago that peace at home keeps wars outside cleaner. Junibug stayed in the Cadillac, engine running. He always kept the engine running. A smart driver prepares for two things: departure and pursuit. Inside, everything looked normal. Mothers arguing over fruit. Old men debating prices like it was politics. Teenagers pretending not to notice me, but noise has layers. And I heard one that didn't belong. Rubber dragging against tile, not walking. Dragging, a man's voice. Too calm, too careful. Let's go, we're late. The little voice answering him didn't carry. It cracked. I didn't turn right away. Turning too fast makes prey bolt. I let the sound paint the picture for me. Then I looked. White man. Mid-40s maybe. Jacket zipped up in weather that could melt steel. Sweat that didn't match the temperature. Hand locked around a little girl's wrist like he was holding stolen property. She was dressed for Sunday service. Yellow dress, hair neat, shoes polished, her eyes weren't. He saw me. Recognition hit him first, fear second. He tightened his grip. Now in my world, you don't move on assumptions. Mistakes cost reputation. Reputation costs control. Control costs everything. But then she looked straight at me, didn't scream, didn't cry. She lifted her free hand. Thumb folded into her palm, fingers closed over it. Once, twice. Her lips moved without sound. Not my father. That's when the coffee can in my hand folded like paper. He started moving faster, almost jogging, toward the exit. Forgot my wallet. He barked at the cashier. Nobody believed him. Nobody stopped him either. That's the thing about fear. It freezes good people. I don't freeze. I let the can drop. Metal hit tile loud enough to wake the room up. Lock the back, I told the stock boy as I passed. Didn't raise my voice. Didn't need to. Outside, heat slapped my face. He was halfway down the block now, dragging her toward a tired blue Chevy parked crooked by a hydrant. Junibug saw my expression before I said a word. He straightened up slow. Block him, I said. That was it. No panic, no rush. The Cadillac rolled like judgment across the street, cutting off the lane. The Chevy tried to lurch forward. Tires screamed. Engine coughed. I stepped behind it, planted my cane on the asphalt and looked at him through his own mirror. Trapped in front, trapped behind, crowd starting to gather. He reached under his seat. I saw it before it came up. Snub revolver. Hand trembling so bad the barrel tapped the glass. I'm federal. He shouted. I've dealt with federal. They don't sweat like that. He aimed at my chest. Behind me, Harlem went quiet. He called me something ugly, something meant to make men react. I didn't blink. You unlock that door, I said evenly. I'll shoot. You won't. He hesitated. That's all I needed. My cane shattered the window in one swing. Glass exploded inward, his scream followed. I reached through the storm of shards, wrapped my hand around his throat and squeezed just enough to let him understand gravity had changed. Gun dropped, door unlocked. I pulled him out and let him taste pavement, then I leaned into the back seat. The girl flinched at first. Smart child, didn't trust men in suits. It's all right, I told her. You did good. She studied my face like she was measuring something. Then she took my hand. Junibug guided her to the Cadillac, gentle as a church usher. Now it was just me and the man on the ground. He tried to find courage in threats. Said he had powerful friends. Said I was making a mistake. Then he said something worse. Said he had a buyer. Upstate, farm. Money exchanged for help. That's when the street shifted. Because now it wasn't just a kidnapping. It was business. And I don't tolerate competition in slavery. I pressed my shoe into the back of his neck. Where, I asked quietly, were you taking her? He started crying. Good. Fear loosens tongues. But before he could answer fully, before the block could exhale. Sirens echoed in the distance, not close, not random, purposeful. And Junibug leaned out the Cadillac window and said something that made even me pause. "Boss, that ain't regular police." The blue Chevy wasn't the only thing in play. Someone bigger was moving pieces, and I could already feel it. The man under my shoe wasn't the top of this ladder. He was bait, and somebody just realized I bit. The night was thick. Harlem's heat clung to your skin like a warning, but out here, the asphalt was a different kind of trap, slick with sweat and oil, alive with shadows. I had the girl in the Cadillac now. Junibug kept the engine idling, lights off, but every head on 125th Street felt the tension rolling off us. I didn't speak. Not yet. Words slowed down a plan. I just watched the man in the street, the one who thought he could buy his way through fear. His chest heaved, sweat streaming down his face, and he realized too late that the world had tilted. Not just him, but the whole block. Everybody understood the rules, don't touch what belongs to me. I knelt beside him, my hand didn't loosen. "Talk," I said, low, quiet. Men like him only understand consequences that breathe, not the law, not cops, me. He whispered names, addresses, upstate, farms, packages, 12 children, 12 daughters. I let it roll in. 12 lives mapped out like merchandise, waiting for the wrong people to touch them. Harlem had been sleeping, authorities too blind or too lazy to notice. I straightened. Junibug knew what was coming. The boy Tyrell, the kid who ran numbers for me, ran back with butcher twine and duct tape. I didn't flinch. I wasn't in a hurry. The streets teach patience better than any jail. By the time we had him secured, tied like a rag doll in the back of the Cadillac, the block had dispersed, leaving a heavy silence. Fear lingered. People could feel the storm, even if they didn't know the forecast. I turned to Penny. The little girl, eyes wide, still trembling. She wasn't screaming anymore. That small, secret hand signal, the one she used when the man grabbed her, was her calling card. And I understood it. That was all the permission I needed. I helped her out of the Cadillac, and she clutched my hand like she'd known me her whole life. "Take her home," I said to Junibug. His nod was sharp. No questions. That was our language, obedience, and you lived to tell about it. Then I looked back at the man in the trunk, the one who thought he was untouchable. I had my eyes on him, but now the real game started. Because taking out the middleman isn't the end. The top of the ladder, that's where the blood flows. And he had just pointed me in the right direction. We drove north, leaving the concrete jungle behind. The Cadillac rolled like a shadow over the Taconic Parkway, 3 deep, carrying wolves and whispers and men who had fought for survival long before they learned to fight for money. None of them were questioning the plan. None of them needed to. The stakes were too high for debate. Miller, he was shaking in the trunk, realizing how far down the river he drifted. I didn't speak to him. Silence is sharper than words. You let the prey stew in it. It makes them crack faster. When the lights of the city faded behind us, darkness wrapped the highway like a warning. Trees pressed close, the smell of pine and damp earth thick in the air. Clean, sharp, innocent, it made the crime ahead feel colder. I checked my Colt, .45, checked the knife in my boot. The map of 12 girls, the man in the trunk, the signal from Penny, all of it pressed against my mind. I wasn't leaving room for mistakes tonight. I wasn't leaving room for mercy. Junibug drove, hands steady, eyes sharp. The other Cadillacs flanked us, wolves moving in formation. Pettigrew whispers the rest. They carried something more than weapons. They carried intent. How much further? I asked calm. 5 miles, Junibug said. I nodded. 5 miles to where Miller delivered his cargo. Where the real monsters waited. Where the rules of the street met the rules of evil. And I knew this wasn't a raid. This was a reckoning. Every mile we drove, my mind ran the angles, guards, dogs, alarms, the kind of fortress that thinks its height and walls matter when a storm like me arrives. By the time we reached the dirt road, the farm crouched at the top of the hill like a secret. Chain-link fence topped with razor wire, lights dimmed, everything thinking we were blind to it. They were wrong. Miller had driven up first. I watched him sweat through the wheel, realizing with each second that he had become the bait and the hunters were right behind him. I stepped out. Night air hit me. Pine, earth, innocence. And I felt the weight of 12 lives riding on this stretch of asphalt. Junibug leaned close. "Boss, they got dogs," he said. I didn't blink. "Let them have dogs," I said. "I'm bringing wolves." And that's when the first shot echoed through the darkness. Not a gun, something else, something sharper. Someone had noticed our approach, and now the trap wasn't just waiting for us, it was watching. The first sound came like a whisper, then grew metal on wood, a bark cut short, a muffled grunt. I moved with the inevitability of a storm. No hesitation, no noise except the tap of my cane on the gravel, every step measured, every shadow scanned. Junibug was already ahead, crouched by the gate, Colt at the ready. Whispers disappeared into the darkness like smoke, bow drawn, silent and deadly. Pettigrew and the others fanned out, covering the perimeter. 12 lives hung in the balance, and every man knew this wasn't a game. Miller's blue Chevy rolled slowly to the fence, his knuckles white on the wheel. He wasn't driving anymore, he was crawling under the weight of terror. Guards leaned from the shack, a Doberman straining against the leash, teeth bared. They thought they had the advantage. I watched. I let them feel the confidence. Let them breathe it in. Then, without warning, the world changed. Whispers loosed an arrow. Quiet, precise. The Doberman screamed mid-leap, and the guard's shotgun clattered to the ground. Junibug moved like a shadow, his foot cracking the other guard's temple. Instant silence, except for the shuffle of leaves and the shallow breaths of men who realized the predator had arrived. I didn't run. I walked forward, cane tapping like a metronome of inevitability. Every shadow I passed folded into the night. The farm had its defenses, so did we. But the lesson was the same. You can build walls, but a mind like mine sees every crack. The driveway opened into the courtyard. Victorian mansion on one side, barn on the other. Music drifting from the main house, fools playing culture over cruelty. My lips tightened. That sound would stop soon enough. I motioned with my hand. Pettigrew, take 3 men to the barn. Secure the girls, no mistakes. Stick, stay with the vehicles, keep engines warm. Junibug whispers, you're with me. The house. Introductions are overdue. We cross the gravel. Not running, not sneaking, walking with purpose. A predator knows when speed is a liability. The guards at the front door saw 3 men, unarmed in appearance, and thought they had a moment to react. I swung the cane. First guard hit. Down. Whisper's arrow pinned the second to the door frame. Junibug silenced the third with a flick of steel. Doors opened. The foyer smelled of polish and false security. Crystal chandeliers, Persian rugs, oil paintings. Soft luxury meant nothing here. Voices from the library, laughter and clinking glasses. Men who had thought themselves untouchable. We walked to them. No hesitation, no explanation, just presence. They turned mid-drink. The air shifted. Every ounce of arrogance drained from the room. A judge, a banker, a city councilman, and the man I'd come for, Varco's, importer extraordinaire, king of cold calculations. All of them suddenly mortal. You don't belong here, I said, calm, quiet, my cane resting lightly against my shoulder, not a threat, a fact. Varco smirked. He was used to deals, to power, to thinking money and influence shielded him. That smirk didn't last. Not when he recognized the weight behind my calm. Not when he understood that Harlem's king wasn't asking. The men froze, names whispered in the papers, in boardrooms, in safe offices. None of it mattered now. The ledger of evil, the accounts of the innocent, all irrelevant against presence. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Fear filled the room, creeping into corners and cracks. I stepped closer and the room shrank around me. Where are the girls? I asked, soft, but every word was a blade. Varco's faltered. Lies spilled, excuses tumbled. I let them. Let them drown in their own weakness. Then the glass shattered. My cane met the decanter, and amber liquid sprayed across silk and mahogany. The sound cut through the room. The lesson became clear. Business is irrelevant when the innocent are touched. The fire had started in their world before the flames ever licked the mansion. My eyes on them, on the ledger, on the judge hiding his face. They understood too late. Reputations, money, power, it all vanished in the presence of consequence. From the shadows, Pettigrew's voice came, low but sharp. We got them, boss, all 12. I nodded. That was the only affirmation needed. 12 daughters safe. The predator's world collapsing under the weight of its own corruption. But even as the girls huddled in blankets, whispers of terror still clung to the walls. The night wasn't done. It never is. Because for every monster burned, every ledger destroyed, there's another waiting, watching, thinking they can step into Harlem and take what isn't theirs. And I'm always watching back. A soft shuffle at the edge of the room caught my attention. Not one of my men. Someone had slipped past the perimeter. The night wasn't finished. The sound was faint, almost polite. A shoe scuffing concrete, a shadow sliding past the firelight. Not my men, not the girls, someone else, someone foolish. I didn't speak. Didn't need to. My eyes swept the library like a predator counting moves on a chessboard. Every man in the room shrank, pressed into the corners of their chairs. Even Varkos, bleeding, humiliated, was trying to calculate escape. Too late. Whispers caught it first. He didn't point, didn't signal, he just disappeared into the darkness outside the broken windows. I followed, Kane tapping a slow rhythm, each step measured, deliberate. The intruder thought they were clever, they weren't. By the time I reached the side door, a figure was crouched behind a stack of crates in the courtyard. Young, fast, desperate, a glint of steel in their hand. I slowed. Let them think they had control. You're lost, I said, calm, not a threat, just an observation. The knife twitched, the figure froze, fear wrapped tight around their limbs. They had no idea who they were dealing with, not yet. I stepped closer, Kane tapping. Every eye in Harlem would recognize the signature of inevitability. One step, another, closer. And then I spoke, soft, almost conversational. You don't know the streets you're in. You don't know me, but you will. And you're about to learn the hard way. The intruder's grip faltered, panic, every survival instinct screaming. They lunged reckless. I didn't move fast, I moved slow, predictable, and that's when I struck. One swing of the cane, precise, unstoppable. The knife clattered to the concrete. They scrambled backward, chest heaving, eyes wide. I bent slightly, face inches from theirs. Next time, I said, think twice before you step into Harlem, or you won't get a warning. They froze, realizing the truth in my words, the kind of fear that didn't need a bullet. The kind that settled in your bones. I straightened, Kane resting lightly at my side. No more moves to make for now. Behind me, the mansion burned, the barn secured, the girls safe. But one truth remained, the streets never forgive. Every shadow could hide another threat. Every whisper could be a setup. And someone was still out there watching, waiting, calculating how they could slip past me next time. I exhaled slowly, the blue smoke curling into the night. Calm, controlled, but the tension lingered. The chessboard wasn't empty. Not yet. Somebody had made a move, and I knew exactly who would pay when the reckoning came. The night had teeth. Harlem's heat had faded, replaced by the chill of shadow and smoke. The mansion's fire crackled behind us, a warning to anyone who thought they could test the streets. But the danger wasn't finished. It never is. I walked past the burning house, Kane clicking, every step deliberate. Pettigrew and the wolves had the barn cleared, girls wrapped in blankets, whispering to calm them. Penny stayed close, her small hand tucked in mine, thumb down, fingers folded, a signal only I understood. She trusted me. That trust carried weight, but my eyes never left the perimeter. One more mistake, one more trespasser, and the calm would snap. I could feel it in the night air, the way it hummed with possibility. Miller sat in the grass, trembling. The blue Chevy a silent witness to his cowardice. He had delivered them, led me here, and now he was nothing more than a tool in my hand. He knew it. I made sure he knew it. Drive, I said, quiet, simple. Junebug slid into the driver's seat of the Chevy, and Miller obeyed, too terrified to resist. Every mile he put between himself and Harlem reminded him who controlled the streets. The convoy moved silently through the country roads, shadows of black Cadillacs rolling like predators behind him. Every man in the cars understood the stakes. 12 girls, a dozen lives, and the promise of retribution. The wolves never make mistakes. I checked my Colt, the click of the cylinder a steady rhythm against the hum of the engine. My eyes scanned the darkness, anticipating every corner, every bush, every hidden angle. Someone was watching. Always watching. And tonight, if they blinked, they'd pay. When we reached the outskirts, the warehouse came into view. Soundproof, safe, temporary, a staging ground before the final reckoning. Miller's hand shook as he pulled in. I didn't touch him, didn't have to. Fear moves faster than steel in the hands of a man like me. Inside, the girls were settled, safe but alert. Penny's eyes never left me. I nodded once. Communication complete. She knew we weren't finished, not by a long shot. "Lock him up," I said, gesturing toward Miller. "Nightfall, make sure he sees the dark." Pettigrew moved silently, tying him in the shadows. The message was clear: betrayal is never without consequence. Outside, the wind whispered through the pines, carrying the faint scent of smoke, gun oil, and danger. I stood at the edge of the warehouse looking out. The world was quiet, too quiet. That's when I felt it, the first ripple of a storm I couldn't yet see. Somewhere out there, someone was making a move, testing the line, probing the edges, thinking they were clever. I smiled just slightly, the calm before the storm. Let them come. Let them try. Because by the time they realized the game had changed, it would already be too late. And in Harlem, the king doesn't forgive. Not tonight. We moved out before the first hint of dawn, the girls tucked safely in the back of the trucks. Penny still held my hand, quiet but alert. Her little signal never left my mind, the reminder that this wasn't just business. This was survival. The road back to Harlem was empty, but silence isn't peace. It's waiting. Every mile, every shadow could hide someone daring enough to test the king. And someone had. I could feel it. Someone wanted to see what happened when you crossed me. Miller rode behind us, gagged, tied, a trembling ghost of a man. I didn't look at him. Didn't need to. He already knew the weight of my patience and the weight of my wrath. One misstep, one word, one glance at the wrong person, and his life would be a lesson written in concrete. The city lights started to pierce the darkness as we crossed the bridge back into Manhattan. Harlem waited, waking slowly, unaware of what had passed, unaware of the storm that had rolled through its streets and left a mark that would linger. We pulled up to 116th Street. Mothers on their stoops, fathers leaning on railings, kids chasing each other through the cracked sidewalks. Normal life, fragile life. I stepped out, keeping Penny close. She ran to her mother, small arms gripping tight, the kind of reunion that burned itself into memory. I watched from the shadow of the Cadillac. The gratitude, the relief, it was loud, messy, but I stayed quiet. This wasn't about being thanked. This was about balance, justice. The scales in Harlem don't tip themselves. Someone has to hold them. The police had arrived, a lone patrol, casual, unaware. They didn't intervene, they recognized me. Everyone did. Harlem's law isn't in uniform, it's in the street. And tonight the street had spoken. I got back into the Cadillac. Junebug slid behind the wheel, engines hummed. Tires whispered across the asphalt. The girls in the truck were safe. For now, but safety is temporary, danger waits in the cracks. The fire, the stolen lives, the broken men, we had sent a message, but the game never ends. Someone had seen, someone had heard, and they were planning their move. I lit a cigar, the tip glowing like a warning flare. The smoke curled around my face. Calm, quiet, deadly, I didn't need to shout. The streets already knew. And as the sun rose over Harlem, I realized tonight wasn't the end. It was just the opening move. The board was set, and someone somewhere was about to be crushed. The day stretched on, sticky and unforgiving, but I didn't move. I stayed in the Cadillac, eyes on 125th Street, watching the neighborhood breathe. Kids on the corners, women carrying groceries, old men playing checkers. Life trying to keep its rhythm. But the rhythm was fragile, I knew it. Every alley held a whisper, every shadow had a story. And someone out there was already scheming, counting, waiting for me to slip. I could feel it before it arrived, a subtle shift in the air, the way the breeze carried voices, the quiet shuffle of boots on pavement. Not my men, not my girls, something new, dangerous. Junebug nudged me. "Boss, something's off." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. My hands rested on the wheel, fingers tapping a slow pattern like a metronome. Patience was a weapon. Observation was sharper than any blade. Then it appeared. A black sedan, slow, deliberate, headlights dimmed. Too calculated to be lost. Too fast to be innocent. Someone was testing me, feeling the edges, seeing if the king slept. I studied the car. Every move, every hesitation, every microsecond of steering. They didn't know I saw the whole game. They didn't know I had already mapped their plan, predicted their weakness, calculated their fear. I let it approach. Let it think it had the advantage. That's when I leaned back, letting the smoke from my cigar curl around my face like a veil. Calm, controlled, menacing. The sedan slowed to a crawl, stopped across the street, 3 men inside, weapons hidden, nervous, reckless, bold enough to think they could play with fire. I didn't flinch, didn't move, just watched, calculated, waited. One wrong signal, one twitch of a trigger finger, and they'd understand why Harlem doesn't forgive mistakes. And then the figure in the passenger seat stepped out, light catching the edge of a blade, a flash of intent. I smiled just slightly, the kind of smile that carries death quietly without hurry. "Welcome to my street," I said, soft, calm, cert. "But I warn you, not everyone leaves alive." The men froze. They hadn't bargained for the quiet storm. They hadn't counted on Bumpy Johnson seeing the whole board. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I already knew they weren't the only ones coming. Harlem had a new game tonight, and the first move had just been made. The tension thickened like smoke, curling around every streetlight, every cracked sidewalk. The 3 men stood frozen, trying to read me, trying to guess what I'd do. They didn't know the game they'd walked into. They didn't know the rules, not yet. I stepped out of the Cadillac, cane tapping the asphalt, slow, deliberate. Each click a heartbeat, each heartbeat a warning. The air carried their fear like perfume. They smelled it. They knew the streets were watching. "Look," I said, calm, quiet, lethal. "You came here thinking you could grab, take, or test me. That's your first mistake." I let the words hang, heavy and cold. "Second mistake, you don't know who you're dealing with." The figure with the knife shifted, trying to intimidate. I didn't flinch, didn't blink. The cane rested in my hands, weight distributed, ready. Not just a stick, a statement, a promise. One of the men made a move, too quick, too eager. I didn't need to react fast. I was already there, already 3 steps ahead. My voice cut through the night. "Stop." That was all, and he froze, the movement caught in midair, the knife inches from me. The other 2 glanced at each other, panic. That old, brittle sound. They realized the trap they'd walked into, and that's when I saw it, the 4th shadow. Someone they hadn't counted on, someone hiding in the alley, waiting for them to slip. Junibug moved like a ghost behind me, hand on his Thompson, eyes scanning, calculating, lethal. The wolves were quiet but present. They didn't need to show themselves. Fear does the work. I smiled again, just slightly. "You wanted the streets," I whispered. "You wanted a piece of Harlem. You just woke a king." The knife wielder dropped his weapon, eyes wide, sweat shining under the streetlight. The others followed. They didn't run, not yet, but the message was clear. One wrong move and the silence would be shattered with pain. And just as I was about to close the distance, another car rolled up from the far end of the block. Headlights low, engine rumbling, too deliberate, too precise. This wasn't random. This wasn't coincidence. Someone else had arrived, someone watching. Someone thinking they could take advantage of the chaos. I tightened my grip on the cane, the weight of it cold and solid in my hands. Harlem had eyes everywhere, and tonight I was about to show exactly why. The street held its breath, and so did I. The new car stopped a few feet from the first 3 men. Its engine hummed low, controlled, like it was breathing with purpose. The driver stayed hidden in shadows, but the passenger's hand rested casually on the door, fingers brushing the edge of a weapon. Too casual, too confident, a mistake. I didn't move, I didn't rush. That's the power, patience, observation, control. I let them think they had time. Let them feel safe just for a heartbeat. Then I stepped forward, cane tapping the asphalt in a slow, deliberate rhythm. "You shouldn't be here," I said, voice low, calm, carrying the weight of a man who had already calculated every outcome. "You don't belong on my street." The first man in the group, knife still abandoned at his feet, turned, eyes darting. He caught the glint of my cufflinks, the way my suit held the light, the calm menace in my stance. That second glance told me everything. They understood finally that this was no ordinary man. This was Harlem's shadow, and he didn't forgive trespassers. The new arrivals hesitated, but hesitation isn't safety. Not here, not tonight. One of them, too eager, made a step forward. His shoe scuffed the pavement. That was all it took. I let the pause stretch, let it hang, heavy like a hammer above his head. Then I moved, not fast, but inevitable. Junibug came around, silent, deadly, a ghost in the night. He circled the car, eyes scanning, every movement precise. Whispers stayed in the shadows, bow taut, ready. The wolves didn't need to reveal themselves yet. Fear was already doing the work. I raised my hand just once, simple gesture, and the first man dropped to his knees, trembling. The second froze. The third stumbled back, realizing the street had claimed them before the fight even began. And just like that, I saw the message behind the new arrival. Someone bigger, someone who thought they could muscle in on Harlem, testing me. They were calculating, waiting for a misstep. But every move, every shadow, every hidden hand, they were all visible to me. I exhaled smoke from my cigar, letting it drift between us like a curtain separating predator and prey. Calm, calculated, lethal, but the tension wasn't over, not even close. Because in the alley I saw another pair of eyes watching, unseen, waiting. Someone who had learned about the chaos. Someone who wanted in. And that's when I realized the night had only just begun. The game had shifted, and someone was about to pay for underestimating Harlem. The street was quiet now, but it was a quiet that carried weight. Every whisper of wind, every distant siren, every shuffle of feet, each one was a signal. The first 3 men were still on their knees, shaking, sweating, realizing that Harlem didn't forgive amateurs. I didn't speak. Didn't need to. My eyes swept the block like a predator sizing up prey, noting exits, entrances, every shadow that might hide a knife, a gun, or a second set of eyes. The new arrivals stayed in their car, tense, guessing, but the real game was already moving. I tapped the cane once on the asphalt. Click, echo, a warning, a heartbeat, a countdown. "Step out," I said calmly, voice carrying the weight of inevitability. "Or sit and wait for the consequences." The driver's side door of the black sedan opened slowly. A man stepped out, tall, shoulders tight, hands hidden in his coat. Confidence dripping. Too much confidence, I could smell it. Desperation masked as bravado. I took a step forward, cane tapping, slow, methodical. Every inch I closed reduced their options. Every heartbeat, every breath they took, I was already calculating. Patience is a weapon sharper than any blade. "You're far from your turf," I said, letting the words hang in the air, heavy and cold. "And tonight, you're trespassing on my rules." One of them laughed nervously, a short, sharp sound that cracked under the pressure. I didn't flinch. I let the moment stretch, let the fear settle into their bones. Then Junibug moved, fast, quiet, a shadow detaching itself from mine. He circled the sedan, gun leveled, eyes sharp. Whispers was already in position, bow drawn, invisible until the arrow would need to fly. The wolves were ready. I didn't even have to tell them. The man with the coat hesitated, shifting weight from one foot to the other. He thought he was in control. He thought he had options. I let him. That's when the first warning hit. The cane tapped the ground twice. Click, click. Subtle, precise. A message he felt in his chest before he saw it. And then just before the first move could be made, another shadow detached from the darkness behind the row of buildings. 2 more men, silent, waiting, observing, thinking they could strike while my attention was divided. I smiled, just slightly, dangerous, calm, quiet menace. Harlem was a chessboard, and tonight every pawn, every rook, every hidden player, they were all moving exactly where I wanted. But I knew one thing, one wrong move, one single miscalculation, and blood would spill before anyone realized it. The night was far from over, and the real threat had yet to show itself. The night pressed in, thick and heavy, like the city itself was holding its breath. Every shadow on 125th Street stretched long, trembling under the flicker of a single street lamp. The 3 men on their knees weren't moving. The second crew in the black sedan wasn't moving. No one dared. Not yet. I stayed calm, letting the silence work. That's the power, the quiet before the storm. My cane tapped the pavement once, twice, and I could feel the tension coiling around everyone like a steel wire. A predator doesn't chase recklessly. He waits until the kill is inevitable. Then movement, too subtle for anyone but me. A figure slinking along the fire escape above, eyes on us, hands brushing the metal railing. Someone watching, someone hoping to slip in unnoticed. I didn't need to shout. My voice carried across the block, low, deliberate, carrying the weight of authority. "I see you." The figure froze, and I saw the small flicker of panic cross his face. He wasn't trained. He wasn't ready. He had no idea who he was dealing with. I could feel it in his posture, the way his shoulders tightened, the way his eyes darted. Junebug stepped closer to the sedan. Quiet now, every movement precise, every muscle controlled. Whispers melted into the shadows behind the alley, bow taut, arrow ready. I didn't need to signal them. They knew the rhythm. They knew the code. The first of the black-suited men in the sedan tried to make a move, just the slightest twitch, but it was enough. My cane tapped again, a single sharp click. The sound reverberated across the asphalt, a warning, a countdown, a promise. Now, I breathed, just enough for them to hear, just enough for them to understand. And the street exploded with motion. Junebug kicked the sedan door, the gun raised, the wolves slipping from the shadows like ghosts, silent and lethal. The three men on the knees scrambled, screaming, desperate. Their moment of control evaporated. I moved through it all like smoke, calm, deliberate, untouchable. Eyes locked on the tallest figure in the sedan, the one who thought he was the king of this sudden chaos. The air was thick with fear, sweat, and the metallic edge of imminent violence. Every footstep I took echoed authority. Every tap of the cane marked inevitability. And then I saw it. A second car, racing toward the block from the far end. Tires squealing, engine raw, carrying someone who didn't know the street had eyes, who didn't know the king of Harlem had been watching. I stopped, smoked a drag of my cigar. Click, click. Patience, observation, lethal calculation, and I smiled again just slightly, because the night wasn't over, and the real danger was still coming. The headlights tore through the darkness, carving jagged shadows across the brick facades. Whoever was coming didn't slow down, didn't pause to check. They thought speed was safety. They thought the street was empty. They were wrong. I stayed where I was, cane tapping once against the asphalt. Click, a heartbeat. Click, another heartbeat. The rhythm was mine, and they were marching to it whether they knew it or not. Junebug moved like a panther to the side of the street, hand resting lightly on the hood of the Cadillac, waiting. Whispers slipped into the alley, bow knocked, unseen. The wolves melted out of shadows behind the sedan, silent teeth and cold eyes. The car screeched to a stop 50 feet from us. Doors swung open. A man in a tailored coat stepped out, face hidden in the shadow of his hat. He didn't recognize the code, the rules, the street's silent warning. Not yet. I tilted my head, eyes sharp, reading him in an instant. Too confident, too cocky, too late. "You picked the wrong night," I said softly, calm, measured. The kind of calm that carries menace, that presses on a man's chest before he even knows he's in trouble. He laughed, short, nervous. I didn't flinch. I let it hang. Every sound he made fed the tension, made the moment heavier. Then movement behind him. A glint. The wolves circling, whispers ready. Junebug poised. I didn't need to rush. I didn't need to yell. I let the fear build like a weight pressing down on him. Glanced around, realization flickering across his eyes just as a shadow detached from the fire escape above. Someone had been watching him too, waiting for the chaos. But he had no idea what kind of chaos he'd stumbled into. I took a step forward, cane tapping, slow, deliberate. Every inch I closed shrank his options. Every measured breath I took tightened the invisible noose. And just as he reached for something in his coat, a gun, a knife, a last desperate hope, I stopped him with a single word. Freeze. The air thickened. The night held its breath. And in that moment I knew, one wrong move, one flicker of hesitation, and this block would turn into a graveyard for anyone foolish enough to test Harlem's king. But the real twist, the real threat, the one nobody had seen coming, was still in motion. And it was moving faster than anyone realized. The man in the coat froze, fingers brushing the edge of his weapon, and for the first time fear cracked through his arrogance. I could see it in the tilt of his shoulders, the way his knees locked, the shallow pulse in his neck. He thought he had an advantage. He didn't. I stepped closer, slow, each tap of my cane on the asphalt echoing like a judge's gavel. Click, click. Each sound was a mark of inevitability, a reminder that in this street, hesitation is fatal. Junebug flanked him from the left, moving like a shadow, gun trained but not raised yet. Whispers shifted behind the sedan, bow taut, arrow ready to fly without a sound. The wolves pressed forward, circling, teeth bared, muscles coiled. He was boxed in, every exit cut off, every choice gone. Harlem doesn't forget, I said, calm, quiet, letting the words sink into his bones. And tonight it doesn't forgive. He laughed again, weaker this time, a tremble betraying his bravado. I'm just delivering, he stuttered. His words fell short, hollow. The streets swallowed them before they could reach anyone's ears. I didn't need to shout, I didn't need to fire. The power wasn't in my hands, it was in the inevitability of the game, in the silence, in the way I could see everything, know everything, and wait. Then the subtle shift, the real threat revealed itself. From the shadows, another figure appeared, moving fast, too fast for any normal man to see clearly. Someone who had been tracking him, following every step he took since he left the highway. Someone who knew this block, knew me, knew exactly what needed to happen. I tilted my head slightly, cigar smoke curling around my face. The night was about to explode, and the man in the coat realized, just a second too late, that he was not walking into Harlem tonight. He was stepping into a trap he couldn't escape. Every heartbeat from here on out would be his last chance to survive. And the streets were waiting. The second figure dropped from the shadows like a storm breaking over the city, silent, precise, impossible to predict. The man in the coat froze, eyes widening, hands trembling on the weapon that no longer felt like protection. I stepped closer, cane tapping, slow and deliberate. Click, click, each strike a metronome counting down his options. There was no heroics tonight, no luck, only consequences. Junibug mirrored my pace, gun low but ready. Whispers blended into the darkness, bow drawn, the arrow trembling in his grip like a snake coiled to strike. The wolves pressed in, bodies tight, breathing shallow, waiting for the first crack, the first misstep. "You're late," I said softly, letting the words slide over him like smoke. "And you're standing in the wrong place." He opened his mouth, started to argue, but I didn't let it happen. I didn't need to raise my voice. The weight of the street, of every deal, every betrayal, every unspoken rule pressed down on him. And in that weight he saw the truth. He was alone, outmatched, and every choice he thought he had was gone. Then the unseen watcher moved and everything shifted. The second figure was close now, within striking distance, and the man's eyes darted, desperate, wild. I could see the calculation in his mind, the panic clawing through. He had underestimated Harlem. He had underestimated me. I tapped the cane once more. Click. A heartbeat. Another heartbeat. The rhythm held him still, paralyzed, like a spider in the web. And then the first gunshot rang out, sharp, precise, cutting through the tension like glass. The man in the coat jerked, realizing too late that the night had chosen sides. The chaos had begun. And in the distance, more shadows were stirring, others who had been waiting, watching, planning. They didn't know I could see them all. They didn't know the game had already been decided, but they would soon. Because in Harlem, when the king moves, the whole city feels it. And tonight, everyone who thought they were untouchable was about to learn why. The man in the coat hit the asphalt before he even realized he'd been pushed. 1 second, he thought he had options. The next, every choice vanished, swallowed by the weight of what he had stepped into. I didn't run, didn't panic, didn't shout. I just walked, cane tapping a slow rhythm against the concrete. Click, click, like a metronome counting the seconds until his world ended. Every step I took compressed the air around him, made the shadows longer, the night colder. Junibug was already moving, circling, ready. Whispers was a whisper no more. His arrow had found a target, and the silent hum of menace filled the block. The wolves tightened their circle, and the man realized he was surrounded by more than just muscle. He was trapped by instinct, intelligence, and inevitability. He tried to reach for the gun again, shaking, but I saw it before he could. One slow, deliberate step, and I was there, pressing the cane against his chest. The weight wasn't the point. The point was knowing I could crush him if I wanted, that the control was mine. "You thought you could walk through Harlem and take what didn't belong to you," I said, voice low, calm, deadly. "You thought you could ignore the rules. You were wrong." He whimpered, backing into the curb, desperate, eyes flicking to the shadows where Whispers and the wolves waited. I tilted my head, reading him like an open book, every secret, every lie, every panic-stricken heartbeat. Then movement in the distance caught my attention. Another figure, another threat approaching fast. Whoever this was didn't know the game, didn't know the block, didn't know me, but they were about to learn. Harlem doesn't forgive mistakes. Harlem doesn't forget. And tonight, the city was about to remind everyone why I ruled it. The man on the ground understood one last truth. The night had already decided his fate. And the shadows whispered someone else was coming, carrying a secret that could turn everything upside down. The air trembled with it, the kind of tension that curls under your skin and makes your chest tight. The new figure closed the distance, silent but purposeful, moving like they had rehearsed every step. They weren't running. They weren't panicking. They were precise, calculated, dangerous. I didn't flinch. Cane tapping, slow, deliberate. Click, click. Every step I took told the man on the ground exactly who he was dealing with, and he knew deep down he had no say in it. Junibug tightened his stance, the gun low but ready, eyes scanning, calculating. Whispers slid into position behind the sedan, bow taut, arrow aimed at the first sign of movement that didn't belong. The wolves, bodies coiled, silent, watched like predators scenting blood. The approaching figure paused just short of the circle, and I saw it, the edge in their eyes, the quiet fire that could burn everything down. They weren't here to negotiate. They weren't here to beg. They were here to settle scores that had been left dangling in the shadows for too long. The man in the coat scrambled backward, panic overtaking him, realizing too late he was not the center of this game. He never had been. The street, the night, the king, and now this newcomer, they were the rules. I tilted my head slightly, cigar smoke curling around my face. Calm, controlled, every instinct screaming, yet every move measured. The figure made their move fast, silent, a shadow striking from the darkness. The man on the ground screamed, a brief, pitiful sound. And just like that, the balance of power shifted again. I didn't speak. I didn't act yet. I watched, always watching, always calculating. Because in my city, in my streets, every new threat has a place, and every threat leaves a mark. The night was far from over, and I could feel it, the first pulse of something far deadlier, far more cunning, moving just beyond the edge of the streetlight. Someone was coming for more than revenge. And they weren't going to wait. The newcomer didn't hesitate. Every movement sharp, silent, controlled. They circled the man on the ground like a predator sizing up prey, calculating, patient, ready to strike without a single wasted motion. The panic in the man's eyes was enough to taste the fear in the air. I stayed back, cane in hand, watching every detail. I didn't need to rush. Control isn't shown in speed, it's in patience. It's in making your opponent realize too late that they're trapped in a game they can't win. Junibug flanked me, Thompson ready, eyes scanning every shadow. Whispers had vanished into the darkness, blending with the night, bow knocked, arrow ready for anything that moved wrong. The wolves stayed close, muscles coiled, watching, waiting. Everyone knew the rules. Nobody moves without my say. Nobody. The man on the asphalt tried to crawl backward, lips quivering, hands flailing. Please, please, he begged, but words were useless. Nothing he could say would undo the mistake of stepping into my streets, of touching what didn't belong to him. Then the newcomer acted. Swift movement, a controlled strike, and the man's terror deepened, an unmistakable message. He was powerless, not because of me, yet but because the streets had eyes and the shadows had teeth. I took a slow step forward, cane tapping, echoing like a heartbeat in the silence. Click, click, each strike measured, deliberate, commanding. The tension hung heavy, almost solid in the thick August night. I looked at the newcomer, eyes dark, calculating, and nodded once. They understood. This wasn't just about fear. It was about respect, about order, about making the people who thought they could move against us remember the cost. The man on the ground whimpered, realizing fully now he had walked into a corner with no exit, no allies, no backup, only consequences. And somewhere just beyond the circle of light, another presence stirred, watching, waiting, patient. Someone who hadn't made their move yet, but whose arrival promised a storm heavier than anything that had hit the street so far. Because in Harlem, threats never come alone, and the night was far from finished. The quiet stretched, too quiet. Even the night seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the next move. I could feel it, the subtle shift in the shadows, the way the air pressed heavier, the way the street seemed smaller, tighter, as if the city itself was leaning in to watch. The newcomer glanced at me once, a flicker of recognition in their eyes. Not fear, respect, caution. They knew the board and they knew I had already moved the pieces. Every option the man on the ground thought he had was gone. Every escape route sealed by the inevitability of Harlem law, the kind that doesn't need papers, badges, or permission. Junibug's grip on the Thompson tightened, a subtle warning more than a threat. Whisper's arrow rested, ready to draw at a heartbeat's notice. The wolves were statues, silent and lethal, their attention locked on every flicker of movement. And then I saw it. Across the street, half hidden by the heat haze and streetlights, another figure stepped forward, slow, deliberate, unseen by the man on the ground, but not unseen by me. The kind of person who waits for the perfect angle, the perfect moment. The kind of person who doesn't just play the game, they rewrite the rules. The man on the asphalt realized too late. He tried to scramble, tried to plead, but the shift in the night told him the truth. He was surrounded, outnumbered, outclassed, outmatched in ways he couldn't understand. I tilted my head, cane tapping, slow, controlled. Click, click, each sound a countdown. The newcomer at my side moved closer to the man, silent, precise, lethal, without needing to touch a weapon yet. And then the distant figure made a choice. A subtle step, a whisper of motion, a shadow moving with intent toward the center of the street. I didn't flinch, I didn't speak. I watched, because the game was bigger than this block, and whatever was coming next wasn't a warning, it was a declaration. The night hadn't finished with us yet, and someone was about to learn exactly why Bumpy seized the whole board. The distant figure closed in, slow but unstoppable, like a tide creeping over rocks. Every instinct I had honed in the streets told me this wasn't random. This was calculated, precise. Someone who had studied the block, studied me, studied the rules, but hadn't realized the king had already moved first. I stayed still, cane planted firmly, letting the night stretch the tension. Click-a-click, each tap a heartbeat, a warning, a signal to anyone who thought they could test me. The man on the ground trembled, realizing the game had grown beyond him. He had thought this was a fight he could survive. He was wrong. The newcomer at my side didn't move like a typical street fighter. They flowed, silent, their presence a statement. They didn't speak, didn't need to. The man on the asphalt could feel it in his gut. Whatever happened next, he wouldn't like it. Then the figure from the shadows stepped fully into the light, revealing just enough to make the hairs on my neck rise. They weren't alone, but they weren't a crowd either. Just one, sharp, deliberate, carrying an edge that even I had to respect. Eyes locked on me, and for the first time tonight, I felt the weight of a predator who didn't just survive Harlem. Maybe they could even challenge me. I exhaled slowly, cigar smoke curling around my face. Calm, calculated, deadly. I adjusted my cuffs, shifted my stance, letting every movement speak louder than words. The man on the ground made a whimpering sound, pleading. His voice cracked in the night. He didn't matter anymore. He was collateral in a game he never understood. I took one deliberate step forward. The newcomer mirrored, slow, precise, measuring me. The air between us became electric. Every eye on the block, every shadow, every wolf waiting in the darkness held its breath. And then a whisper of emotion, a hand, a signal, a secret in plain sight. Someone in the dark had just changed the rules. Because in Harlem, even kings aren't always the first to see the knife in the shadows. And tonight the blade was about to fall. The air tightened, thick with anticipation. Every nerve in my body was awake, every sense alert. The newcomer wasn't flinching. They didn't hesitate. Their eyes measured, calculated, weighing every option, and I could see the truth. They were just as dangerous as the streets that raised me. Junibug shifted, a low rumble in his chest, ready but restrained. Whispers melted into the shadows, bow raised, muscles coiled. The wolves, silent, cold-eyed, knew the rules, attack only on my signal. Tonight, every second counted, every heartbeat was leverage. The man on the asphalt whimpered again, futilely. He realized, finally, that survival wasn't in words, wasn't in scrambling or pleading. Survival had nothing to do with him anymore. He was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, a mistake measured in inches and seconds. The shadowed figure from across the street made the first subtle move, a step forward, just enough to shift the balance. Their presence was a threat that didn't need noise. It was a quiet menace, the kind that makes even the boldest hesitate, the kind that whispers, "You're not alone tonight." I let the tension stretch, cane tapping lightly. Click, click, each strike a pulse, signaling the rhythm of control. My eyes never left the newcomer. I could feel their plan, their patience, their intent to see how I would respond. They didn't know yet that every chess piece I move is calculated, every corner of this block already anticipated. Then the street itself seemed to lean in, shadows twisting. A hidden figure emerged from an alley, another layer of threat, unseen but felt. The night had deepened, and the board had just doubled in complexity. And in the quiet, I smiled slightly, just enough to let them know I saw it all. I saw every angle, every hidden hand, every whispered threat. Because in Harlem, knowing the game before anyone else isn't luck, it's survival. And tonight, someone was about to learn that you can't sneak into my streets without consequences. But the real danger, it wasn't even here yet. The street held its breath. Every shadow, every corner, every sound from the alley seemed to stretch longer, waiting for a move that hadn't come yet. I didn't rush. Never rush. That's how mistakes are made, and tonight there were no mistakes allowed. The newcomer across the street hesitated, then stepped forward, a calculated reveal. I could see them clearly now, eyes sharp, movements precise, the kind of quiet power that could carve the city if left unchecked. They weren't here to talk, they were here to test. And in Harlem, you test a king at your own peril. Junibug's hand brushed the grip of the Thompson, not tense, just ready. Whispers melted into the shadows, bow resting lightly, patient. The wolves crouched, tails still, muscles coiled. Every piece of my crew moved with anticipation, waiting for my cue, but I wasn't giving it. Not yet. The man on the asphalt whimpered, small and insignificant now, realizing he had no leverage. Every plan he had, every hope of escape, had vanished the moment he stepped onto my block. Survival wasn't for him tonight. Survival was a lesson for the others who thought the streets could be played like a game of chance. And then the figure made a subtle move, a hand flick, a tilt of the head, an unreadable gesture. It was meant for me, a warning wrapped in patience. I smiled slightly, calm, calculated, deadly. Because in Harlem, seeing the game before anyone else isn't luck. It's control, and tonight I held the board. The convoy moved like ghosts through the back roads, tires crunching gravel, headlights swallowed by darkness. Miller gripped the wheel like a man holding onto his last breath. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. The weight of what we were about to do hung in the car like smoke. The farm appeared suddenly, hidden behind a wall of pines and fog. Razor wire glinted in the faint light, dogs barking in the distance, guards moving in slow, careful patterns. They didn't know we were coming. They didn't know what was waiting, and that was their first mistake. I stepped out, cane in hand, each tap deliberate, echoing through the night. Junibug and Whispers flanked me, silent shadows themselves. The wolves fanned out, invisible until the moment they struck. Every angle covered, every exit blocked, every threat anticipated. Inside the compound, movement stirred, voices, laughter, the careless confidence of men who thought they owned this place. But confidence is fragile, and tonight it was about to shatter. I signaled with the cane. 1, 2, 3. Doors were breached quietly, locks cut, shadows slipping in. The girls were huddled, confused, scared, but alive. Their fear was palpable. I leaned down, whispering just enough to reach them. Stay close. Don't speak. Not yet. Outside, the first guard caught sight of movement. A flash of steel, a soft grunt, and he dropped before he could make a sound. The Doberman lunged, teeth bared, only to meet the silence of Whispers, arrow precise, lethal. And as the night swallowed the chaos, I saw them, faces of those who thought they could play with children like pieces on a board. They hadn't yet realized the kind of predator I am. The stakes had escalated. The danger had multiplied. And in Harlem, there's no second chance when someone crosses the line. The air inside the barn was thick, metallic, and wrong. Fear clung to the rafters like dust. I moved through it slow, deliberate, cane tapping, every step measured, every shadow accounted for. The girls huddled together, eyes wide, silent. They knew the danger, but they also knew I was the one thing between them and the monsters out there. The men who ran this place were soft in the wrong way, pampered, careless, thinking muscle and guns were enough. They hadn't counted on strategy. They hadn't counted on me seeing everything before it even happened. I leaned against a beam, letting them realize the predator had arrived. "Hands where I can see 'em," I said, calm low. My voice carried without effort, slicing through the tension. One moved fast, trying to make a run. Mistake. A flick of my cane and he was on the floor, gasping. Another reached for a weapon. Mistake. Whispers had him, arrow steady, silent. I walked past them, slow, eyes scanning. Names and faces meant nothing. Intent mattered. They had used children to line their pockets. That's where judgment meets reality. And I am the kind of judgment that doesn't negotiate. The girls watched, understanding without words. Penny stayed close, clutching my sleeve, thumb in, fingers down. I nodded, acknowledging her bravery. It was the language of survival, the signal I had trained my eyes to catch. Outside, a faint sound, the crunch of gravel, the snap of a twig. Another threat, another layer I hadn't yet accounted for. Someone else was watching, waiting, maybe hoping to strike once the chaos settled. But out there, the streets have eyes too. And so do I. Harlem had taught me patience. The city had taught me timing. And tonight, anyone who moved without knowing the board would pay. I stepped into the moonlight, barn behind me burning quietly, the scent of scorched wood thick in the air. The girls were safe, bundled into the trucks, silent but steady. Penny's hand in mine, thumb in, fingers down, told me she trusted the streets as much as she trusted me. That was enough. Miller was still alive, cowering where he belonged, a broken man on the asphalt of his own making. The others, the men who had trafficked, who had counted children like money, they were learning a lesson no ledger could explain. Respect, fear, survival. One hand on the shoulder, one eye on the shadows, that's how I run my business. We moved out slow, deliberate. Engines hummed, tires on gravel. Harlem wasn't far, but the road back carried weight. Every mile a reminder, power isn't given, it's seized. It's maintained, it's defended. By the time we rolled onto 116th Street, the sun was cracking the horizon. The neighborhood stirred, dealers taking corners, mothers stepping into the morning, kids running before school. They saw us, Cadillac cutting through the light haze, and understood without asking. The king had returned. The girls were reunited, mothers clinging, tears streaming, voices breaking. I stood back, quiet, watching the balance restored. No sirens, no flashing lights. Just Harlem breathing again under the sun. I didn't smile. I didn't need to. My presence said enough. The heat rose, familiar, oppressive, but it didn't touch me. I'd walked through fire, faced monsters, and Harlem knew who controlled the streets tonight. Wolves are silent. Wolves are patient. Wolves strike only when necessary. And somewhere in the shadows, someone else was watching, waiting, hoping, underestimating. I tipped my hat, cane resting lightly against the Cadillac. My work wasn't done. In Harlem, the devil never sleeps. And neither do I. The streets had eyes. I had the rest. And the game was far from over.